Hello, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes for another night of story time. And we continue with the Dashiell Hammett novel, Red Harvest. We begin tonight with Chapter 7. That's why I sewed you up. It was 5:30. I walked around a few blocks until I came to an unlighted electric sign that said Hotel Crawford. Climbed a flight of steps to a second-floor office, registered, left a call for 10 o'clock, was shown into a shabby room, moved some of the scotch from my flask to my stomach, and took old Elio's $10,000 check and my gun to bed with me. At 10, I dressed, went up to the First National Bank, found young Albury, and asked him to certify Wilson's check for me. He kept me waiting a while. I suppose he phoned the old man's residence to find out if the check was on the up and up. Finally, he brought it back to me, properly scribbled on. I sponged an envelope, put the old man's letter and check in it, addressed it to the agency in San Francisco, stuck a stamp on it, and went out and dropped it in the mailbox on the corner. Then I returned to the bank and said to the boy, "Now, tell me why you killed him." He smiled and asked, "Cock Robin or President Lincoln?" "You're not going to admit offhand that you killed Donald Wilson." "I don't want to be disagreeable," he said, still smiling, "but I'd rather not." "That's going to make it bad," I complained. "We can't stand here and argue very long without being interrupted. Who's the stout party with the cheaters coming this way?" The boy's face pinked. He said, "Dr. Dritten, the cashier." "Introduce me." The boy looked uncomfortable, but he called the cashier's name. Dritten, a large man with a smooth pink face, a fringe white hair around an otherwise bald pink head, and rimless nose glasses, came over to us. The assistant cashier mumbled the introductions. I shook Dritten's hand without losing sight of the boy. "I was just saying," I addressed Dritten, "that we ought to have more private place to talk in. He probably won't confess till I've worked on him a while, and I don't want everybody in the bank to hear me yelling at him." "Confess?" The cashier's tongue showed between his lips. "Sure." I kept my face, voice and manner bland, mimicking Noonan. "Didn't you know that Albury is the fellow who killed Donald Wilson?" A polite smile at what he thought was an asinine joke started behind the cashier's glasses, and changed to puzzlement when he looked at his assistant. The boy was rouge red, and the grin he was forcing his mouth to wear was a terrible thing. Dritten cleared his throat and said heartily, "It's splendid morning, isn't it? We've been having splendid weather." "But isn't there a private room where we can talk?" I insisted. Dritten jumped nervously and questioned the boy. What is this?" Young Albury said something nobody could have understood. I said, "If there isn't, I'll have to take him down to the city hall." Dritten caught his glasses as they slid down his nose, jammed them back in place, and said, "Come back here." We followed him down the length of the lobby, through the gate and into the office, whose door was labeled President, Old Ilio's office. Nobody was in it. I motioned Albury to sit in one of the chairs and picked up another for myself. The cashier fidgeted with his back against the desk, facing both of us. "Now, sir, will you explain this?" he said. "We'll get around to that." I told him and turned the boy. "You're an ex-boyfriend of Dinah's, who was given the air. You're the only one who knew her intimately, who could have known about the certified check in time to phone Mrs. Wilson and Thaler. Wilson was shot with a .32. Banks like that caliber. Maybe the gun you used wasn't a bank gun, but I think it was. Maybe you didn't pick it up. Maybe you didn't put it back. Then there'll be one missing. Anyhow, I'm going to have a gun expert put his microscopes and micrometers onto the bullets that killed Wilson, and the bullets fired from all the guns in the banks." The boy looked calmly at me and said nothing. He had himself under control again. That wouldn't do. I had to be nasty. I said, "You were cuckoo over the girl. You confessed to me that it was only because she wouldn't stand for it that you didn't." "Don't, please don't," he gasped. His face was red again. I made myself sneer at him until his eyes went down. Then I said, "You talk too much, son. You were too damn anxious to make your life an open book for me. That's a way you amateur criminals have. You always gotta overdo the frank and open business." He was watching his hands. I let him have the other barrel. "You know, you killed him. You know, if you used a bank gun, and if you put it back. If you did, you're nailed now. Without it, the gun sharks will take care of that. If you didn't, I'm going to nail you anyhow, all right? I don't have to tell you whether you've got a chance or not, you know. Noonan's framing Whisper Thaler for the job. He can't convict him, but the frame-up is tight enough that Thaler's killed resisting arrest. The chief will be in the clear. That's what he means to do, to kill Thaler. Thaler stood off the police all night in his King Street joint. He's still standing them off, unless they've got to him. The first copper that gets to him, exit Thaler. If you figure you've got a chance to beat your rap, and you want to let another man be killed on your account, that's your business. But if you know you haven't got a chance, and if the gun can be found, for God's sakes, give Thaler one by clearing him. I'd like, Albury's voice was an old man's. He looked up from his hands, saw Dritton and said, I'd like, again, and stopped. Where's the gun? I asked. In Harper's cage, the boy said. I scowled at the cashier and asked him, will you get it? He went out as if he were glad to go. I didn't mean to kill him, the youngster said. I don't think I meant to. I nodded encouragingly, trying to look solemnly sympathetic. I don't think I meant to kill him. I don't think I meant to kill him, he repeated. Though I took the gun with me, you were right about me being a cuckoo over Dinah. It was worse some days than others. The day Wilson brought the check in was one of those bad days. All I could think about was that I had lost her because I had no more money, and he was taking $5,000 to her. It was a check. Can you understand that? I had known that she and Thaler were, you know. If I had learned that Wilson and she were too, without seeing the check, I wouldn't have done anything. I'm sure of it. It was seeing the check and knowing I'd lost her because my money was gone. I watched her house that night and saw him go in. I was afraid of what he might do because it was one of those bad days. And I had the gun in my pocket. Honestly, I didn't want to do anything. I was afraid. I couldn't think of anything but the check and why I had lost her. I knew Wilson's wife was jealous. Everybody knew that. I thought if I called her up and told her, I don't know exactly what I thought, but I went to a store around the corner and phoned her. Then I phoned Thaler. I wanted them there. If I could have thought of anyone else who had anything to do with either Dinah or Wilson, I'd have called them too. Then I went back and I watched Dinah's house again. Mrs. Wilson came, and then Thaler, and both of them stayed there, watching the house. I was glad of that. With them there, I wasn't so afraid of what I might do. After a while, Wilson came out and walked down the street. I looked up at Mrs. Wilson's car at the doorway there, where I knew Thaler was. Neither of them did anything, and Wilson was walking away. I knew that, why, I had wanted them there. I had hoped they would do something, and I wouldn't have to. But they didn't, and he was walking away. If one of them had gone over and said something to him, or even followed him, I wouldn't have done anything. But they didn't. I remember taking the gun out of my pocket. Everything was blurred in front of my eyes. Like I was crying. Maybe I was. I don't remember shooting. I don't remember deliberately aiming and pulling the trigger, but I can remember the sound of the shots made and that I knew the noise was coming from the gun in my hand. I don't know. I don't remember how Wilson looked, if he fell before I turned and ran up the alley or not. When I got home, I cleaned and reloaded the pistol and put it back in the paying teller's cage the next morning. On the way down to City Hall, With the boy and the gun, I apologized for the village cut-up stuff I had put in the early part of the shakedown, explaining, I had to get under your skin, and that was the best way I knew. The way you talked about the girl showed me you too were a good actor to be broken down by a straight hammering. He winced and said slowly, that wasn't acting altogether. When I was in danger facing the gallows, she didn't seem so important to me. I can't now quite understand fully why I did what I did. Did you know what I mean? That somehow makes the whole thing and me cheap. I mean, the whole thing from the beginning. I couldn't find anything to say except meaningless things. This happens that way. Things happen that way. This happened that way. In the chief's office, we found one of the men who had been on the storming party the night before, a red-faced official named Biddle. He goggled at me with curious gray eyes, but asked no questions about the King Street doings. Biddle called a young lawyer named Dart from the prosecutor's office. Albury was repeating a story to Biddle, Dart, and a stenographer when the chief of police, looking as if he had just crawled out of bed, arrived. Well, it certainly is fine to see you, Noonan said, pumping my hand up and down while patting my back. By God, you had a narrow one last night. The rats! I was dead, for sure. Dead sure. They'd got you, till we kicked in the doors and found the joint empty. Tell me how those sons of guns got out of there. A couple of your men let them out the back door, took them through the house in the back, sent them on their way in the apartment car. They took me along so as I could tip you off. A couple of the men did that? He asked, with no apparent surprise. Well, well. What kind of looking men were they? I described them. Shore and Reardon, he said. I might have known it. Now, what's all this? Nodding his fat face at Albury. I told him briefly, while the boy went on dictating the statement. The chief chuckled and said, Well, well, I did whisper an injustice. I'll have to hunt him up and square myself. So you landed the boy. That certainly is fine. Congratulations and thanks. He shook my hand again. You'll not be leaving our city now, will you? Not just yet. That's fine, he assured me. I went down for breakfast and lunch. Then I treated myself to a shave and a haircut. Sent a telegram to the agency asking to have Dick Foley and Mickey Lennon shipped off to Personville. Stopped in my room for a change of clothes and set out for my client's house. Old Elio was wrapped in blankets in an armchair at a sunny window. He gave me a stubby hand and thanked me for catching his son's murderer. I made some more or less appropriate reply. I didn't ask him how he got the news. The check I gave you last night, he said, is only fair pay for the work you've done. Your son's check more than covered that. Then call mine a bonus. The Continental's got rules against taking bonuses and rewards, I said. His face began to redden. Well, damn it, you haven't forgotten that your check was to cover the cost of investigating crime and corruption in Personville, have you? I asked. That was nonsense, he snorted. We were excited last night, that's all. That's all called off now. Not with me. He threw a lot of profanity around then. It's my money, and I won't have it wasted on a lot of damn foolery. If you won't take it for what you've done, give it back to me. Stop yelling at me, I said. I'll give you nothing except a good job of city cleaning. That's what you bargained for, and that's what you're going to get. You know now your son was killed by Albury and not your playmates. They know that Thaler wasn't helping you double-cross them. With your son dead, you've been able to promise them that the newspapers won't dig up any more dirt. All's lovely and peaceful again. I told you I expected something like that. That's why I sewed you up. And you are sewed up. The check's been certified, so you can't stop payment. The letter of authority may not be as good as the contract, but you'll have to go into court to prove it isn't. If you want that much of that kind of publicity to go ahead, I'll see that you get plenty. Your fat chief of police tried to assassinate me last night. I don't like that. I mean, enough to want him to ruin him for it. Now I'm going to have my fun. I've got $10,000 of your money in play with. I'm going to use it to open Poisonville up from Adam's apple to ankles. I'll see that you get my reports as regularly as possible. I hope you enjoy them. And I went out of the house with his curses sizzling around my head. Chapter 8. A tip on Kid Cooper. I spent most of the afternoon writing my 3 days reports on Donald Wilson operation. Then I sat down, burned Fatimas, and thought about Ilya Wilson's operation until dinner time. I went down to the hotel dining room and had just decided in favor of pounded rump steak with mushrooms when I heard myself being paged. The boy took me to one of the lobby booths. Dinah Brand's lazy voice came out of the receiver. Max wants to see you. Can you drop in tonight? Your place? Yes. I promised to drop in and return to the dining room for my meal. And when I had finished eating, I went up to my room, 5th floor front. I unlocked the door and went in, snapping on the light. A bullet kissed a hole in the door frame close to my noodle. More bullets made more holes in the door frame, and wall. But by that time, I had carried my noodle into a safe corner, me out of the line of fire with the window. Across the street, I knew, was a 4-story office building with a roof a little above the level of my window. The roof would be dark. My light was on. There was no percentage in trying to peep out under those conditions. I looked around for something to chuck at the light globe, found Gideon's Bible, and chucked it. The bulb popped apart, giving me darkness. The shooting had stopped. I crept to the window, kneeling with an eye to one of its lower corners. The roof across the street was dark, too, high for me to see beyond its rim. 10 minutes of this one-eyed spying got me nothing except a kink in my neck. I went to the phone and asked the girl to send the house copper up. He was a portly white mustached man with a round, underdeveloped forehead of a child. He wore a too small of a hat on the back of his head to show his forehead. His name was Keever. He got too excited over the shooting. The hotel manager came in, a plump man with a carefully controlled face, voice, and manner. He didn't get excited at all. He took this is unheard of, but not really serious course of attitude of a street faker whose mechanical dingus flops during a demonstration. We risked light getting a new globe and added up all the bullet holes. There were 10 of them. Policemen came in, and then they went, and returned to report no luck in picking up whatever trail there might have been. Noonan called up. He talked to the sergeant in charge of the police detail, and then to me. I, just this minute, heard about things, he said. Now, who do you reckon would be after you like that? I couldn't guess. I lied. None of them touched you? No. Well, that's certainly fine, he said heartily. And we'll nail that baby, whoever he is. You can bet your life on that. Would you like me to leave a couple of the boys with you just to see nothing else happens tonight? No thanks. You can have them if you want them, he insisted. No thanks. He made me a promise to call him first chance I got. Told me Personville Police Department was at my disposal. Gave me to understand that if anything happened to me, his whole life would be ruined. And finally got rid of him. The police went away. I had my stuff moved into another room, one into which bullets couldn't so easily be funneled. Then I changed my clothes and set out for Hurricane Street to keep my date with the Whispering Gambler. Dinah Brand opened the door for me. Her big, ripe mouth was rouged evenly this evening. But her brown hair still needed trimming, was parted haphazardly, and there were spots down the front of her orange silk dress. So you're still alive, she said. I suppose nothing can be done about it. Come on in. We went into our cluttered up living room. Dan Rolfe and Max Thaler were playing a game there. I'm not sure what it was. Some kind of a card game. Rolfe nodded to me. Thaler got up to shake hands. His hoarse, whispering voice said, "I hear you've declared war on Poisonville." "Don't blame me. I've got a client who wants the place ventilated." "Wanted, not wants," he corrected me as we sat down. "Why don't you chuck it?" I made a speech. "No. I don't like the way Poisonville has treated me. I've got my chances now, and I'm going to even up. I take it you're back in the club again, all brothers together. Let bygones be bygones. You won't be let alone. There was a time when I wanted to be let alone. If I had been, maybe now I'd be riding back to San Francisco. But I wasn't. Especially I wasn't letting alone by that fat Noonan. He had 2 tries at my scalp in 2 days. That's plenty. Now it's my turn to run him ragged. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. Poisonville is ripe for the harvest. It's a job I like, and I'm going to do it. "Whilst you last," the gambler said. "Yeah," I agreed. "I was reading in the paper this morning about a fellow choking to death, eating a chocolate eclair in bed." "That may be good," said Dinah Brand, her big body sprawled in an armchair. "But it wasn't in this morning's paper." She lit a cigarette and threw a match out under the side of the Chesterfield's box. The lunger had gathered up the cards and was shuffling them over and over again purposefully. Thaler frowned at me and said, "Wilson's willing for you to keep the 10 grand. Let it go at that." "I've got a mean disposition. Attempted assassinations. Make me mad. That won't get you anything but a box. I'm for you. You kept Noonan from framing me. That's why I'm telling you. Forget it and go back to Frisco." "I'm for you," I said. "That's why I'm telling you. Split with them. They crossed you up once. It'll happen again. Anyway, they're slated for the shoots. Get out while the getting's good." "I'm sitting pretty," he said. "I'm able to take care of myself." "Maybe. But you know, the racket's too good to last. You've had the cream of the pickings. Now it's getaway day." He shook his little dark head and told me, "I think you're pretty good, but I'm damned if you're good enough to crack this camp. It's too tight. If you thought you could swing it, I'd be with you. You know how I stand with Noonan. But you never make it. You'll never make it, so just chuck it." "No. I'm in it to the last nickel of Ilya's 10,000. "I told you, he was too pig-headed to listen to reason," Dinah Brand said, yawning. "Isn't there anything to drink in the dump, Dan?" The lunger got up from the table and went out of the room. Thaler shrugged and said, "Have it your way. You're supposed to know what you're doing. Going to the fights tomorrow night?" I said I thought I would. Dan Rolfe came around with gin and trimmings. We had a couple of drinks apiece. We talked about the fights. Nothing more was said about the me versus Poisonville. The gambler apparently had washed his hands of me, but he didn't seem to hold my stubbornness against me. He even gave me what seemed to be a straight tip on the fights, telling me any bet on the main event would be good if its maker remembered that Kid Cooper would probably knock out Ike Bush, probably knock him out in the 6th round. He seemed to know what he was talking about, and it didn't seem to be news to the others. I left a little after 11, returning to the hotel without anything happening. Chapter 9. A Black Knife. I woke up the next morning with an idea in my skull. Personville had only some 40,000 inhabitants. It shouldn't be hard to spread news. 10 o'clock found me, and it found me spreading it out. I did my spreading in the pool rooms, cigar stores, speakeasies, soft drink joints, and street corners. Wherever I found a man or two loafing, my spreading technique was something like this. "Got a match?" Thanks. Going to the fights tonight? I hear Ike Bush takes a dive in the 6th. It ought to be straight. I got it from Whisper. Yeah, they're all there. People like inside stuff, and anything that Thaler's name was attached to was very inside in Personville. The news spread nicely. Half the men I gave the info to worked almost as hard as I did, spreading it, just to show they knew what was what. When I started out, 7-4 was being offered on Bush to win, and 2-3 that he would win by a knockout. By 2 o'clock, none of the joints were taking bets, or offering anything better than even money, and by 3:30, Kid Cooper was 2-1 favorite. I made my last stop at the lunch counter, where I tossed the newspaper out to a waiter and a couple of customers while eating a hot beef sandwich. When I went out, I found a man waiting at the door for me. He had bowed legs and a long, sharp jaw, like a hog's. He nodded and walked down the street beside me, chewing a toothpick and squinting sideways into my face. At the corner, he said, "I know for a fact that ain't so." "What?" I asked. "About Ike Bush flopping." "I know for a fact that it ain't so." "Then it oughtn't to bother you any. But the wise money's going 2-1 on Cooper, and he's not that good unless Bush lets him be." The hogjaw spit out the mangled toothpick and snapped yellow teeth at me. He told me in his own self that Cooper was set up for him last night, and he wouldn't do anything, or he wouldn't do nothing, not to me. "Friend of yours?" "Not exactly, but he knows." Hey, listen, did Whisper give you that on the level?" "On the level." He cursed bitterly, and I put my last $30 in the world on the rat on this say-so. Me that could send him over for... He broke off and looked down the street. "Could send him over for what?" I asked. "Plenty," said nothing. I had a suggestion. "If you've got something on him, maybe we ought to talk it over. I wouldn't mind seeing Bush win myself. If what you've got is any good, what's the matter with putting it up to him?" He looked at me, at the sidewalk, fumbled his vest pocket for another toothpick, put it in his mouth and mumbled, "Who are you?" I gave him my name, something like Hunter or Hunt or Huntington, and asked his. He said his name was McSwain, Bob McSwain, and I could ask anybody in town if it wasn't right. I said I believed him and asked, "What do you say? Will we put the squeeze to Bush?" Little hard lights came into my eyes and died. "Nope," he gulped. "I ain't that kind of fellow." You never did anything but let people gip you? You don't have to go up against him, McSwain. Give me the dope and I'll make the play, if it's any good. He thought that over, licking his lips, letting the toothpick fall down to a stick on his coat front. "You wouldn't let on about me having any part of it?" he asked. "I belong here. I wouldn't stand a chance if it got out. And you won't turn him up, would you? You'll just use it to make him fight?" "Right." He took my hand excitedly and demanded, "Honest to God?" "Honest to God." His real moniker is Al Kennedy. He was on the Keystone Trust knockover in Philly 2 years ago, when Scissors Haggerty's mob croaked 2 messengers. Al didn't do the killing, but he was on the caper. He used to scrap around Philly. The rest of him got copped. But he made the sneak. That's why he's sticking it out here in the bushes. That's why he won't never let them put his mug in the papers or on any cards. That's why he's a pork and beaner when he's good as the best. See? This Ike Bush is Al Kennedy. That the Philly Bulls want for the Keystone trick. See? He was in on the... I see. I stopped the merry-go-round. The next thing is to get close to him. How do we do that? He flops at the Maxwell on Union Street. I guess maybe he'd be there now, resting up for the mill. Resting up for what? He doesn't know he's going to fight. We'll give it a try, though. We? Where do you get the we at? You said you swore you'd keep me covered. Yeah, I said. I remember that. What does he look like? A black-headed kid, kind of slim, with one tin ear, eyebrows that run straight across. I don't know if he can make him like that or not. Leave it to me. Where'll you find him afterwards? I'll be hanging around Murray's. Mind you, tip my mitt. You promised. The Maxwell was one of a dozen hotels along Union Street, with narrow front doors between stores and shabby stairs leading up to second-story offices. The Maxwell's office was simply a wide place in a hall, with a key and a mail rack behind a wooden counter that needed paint just as badly. A brass bell and a dirty daybook register were on the counter. Nobody was there. I had to run back 8 pages before I found Ike Bush, Salt Lake City, 214, written in the book. The pigeonhole that had the number was empty. I climbed more steps and knocked on the door that had it. Nothing came out. I tried it 2 or 3 more times and then turned back to the stairs. Somebody was coming up. I stood at the top, waiting to look at him. There was just light enough to see by. He was a slim, muscular lad in an army shirt, blue shirt, gray cap, black eyebrows made straight across by a line onto his eyes. I said, "Hello." He nodded without stopping or saying anything. "Win tonight?" I asked. "Hope so," he said shortly, passing me. I let him take a few steps toward his room before I told him, "So, do I? I'd hate to have to ship you back to Philly, Al." He took another step, turned around very slowly, rested a shoulder against the wall, let his eyes get sleepy, and grunted, "Huh?" "If you were smacked down in the 6th or any other round by a palooka like Kid Cooper, it'd make me peevish," I said. "Don't do it, Al. You don't want to go back to Philly." The youngster put his chin down to his neck and came back to me. When he was within arm's reach, he stopped, letting his left arm turn a bit in front. His hands were hanging loose. Mine were in my overcoat pockets. He said, "Huh?" again. I said, "Try to remember that if Ike Bush doesn't turn in a win tonight, Al Kennedy will be riding east in the morning." He lifted his left shoulder an inch. I moved the gun around in my pocket enough. He grumbled, "Where do you get that stuff about me not winning?" "Just something I heard. I didn't think there was anything to it, except maybe a ducat back to Philly." "I oughta bust your jaw, you fat kook." "Now, the time's to do it," I advised him. "If you're going to do it now. If you win tonight, you're not likely to see me again. If you lose, you'll see me, but your hands won't be loose." I found McSwain in Murray's, a Broadway pool room. "Did you get to him?" he asked. "Yeah, it's all fixed. If he doesn't blow town, or say something to the backers, or just pay no attention to me, or..." McSwain developed a lot of nervousness. "You better damn sight be careful," he warned me. "They might try to put you out that way." I got to see a fellow down the street, and he deserted me. Poisonville's prize fighting was done in a big wooden ex-casino in what had once been an amusement park on the edge of town. When I got there at 8:30, most of the population seemed to be on hand, packed in tight and close, rows of folding chairs on the main floor, packed tighter on benches in 2 dinky balconies, smoke, stink, heat, noise. My seat was in the 3rd row, ringside. Moving down to it, I discovered Dan Rolfe, in the aisle seat not far away, with Dinah Brand beside him. She had her hair trimmed at last, and marcelled, and looked a lot of money in a big gray fur coat. "Get down on Cooper?" she asked, after we swapped hellos. "No. You playing him heavy?" "Not as heavy as I'd like." We held off, thinking the odds would get better, but then went to hell. "Everybody in town seems to know Bush is going to dive," said I. "I saw 100 put on Cooper at 4-1 a few minutes ago." I leaned past Rolf and put my mouth close to where the gray fur collar hid the girl's ear, whispering, "The dive is off. Better copper your bets while there's time." Her big bloodshot eyes went wide and dark with anxiety, greed, curiosity, suspicion. "You mean it?" she asked huskily. "Yeah." She chewed her reddened lips, frowned, and asked, "Where'd you get it?" I wouldn't say. She chewed her mouth some more and asked, "Is Max on?" "I haven't seen him here." "Is he here?" "I suppose so," she said absent-mindedly, a distant look in her eyes. Her lips moved as if she were counting to herself. I said, "Take it or leave it, but it's a gut." She leaned forward and looked sharp into my eyes, clicked her teeth together, opened her bag, and dragged out a roll of bills the size of a coffee can. Part of the roll she pushed at Rolf. "Here, Dan, get it down on Bush. You've got an hour anyway to look over the odds." Rolf took the money and went off on his errand. I took a seat. She put a hand on my forearm and said, "Christ help you if you've made me a drop on that dough. I don't want to drop no dough on the wrong guy." I pretended the idea was ridiculous. The preliminary bouts got going. 4 rounds of affairs between assorted hams. I kept looking for Thaler, but I couldn't see him. The girl squirmed beside me, paying little attention to the fighting, dividing her time between asking me where I'd got my information and threatening me with hellfire and dramatization if it turned out to be a bust. The semifinal was on when Rolf came back and gave the girl a handful of tickets. She was straining her eyes over them when I left my own seat. Without looking up, she called to me. "Wait, outside. Wait outside for us when it's over." Kid Cooper climbed into the ring while I was squeezing through my seat. He was a ruddy, straw-haired, solid-built boy with a dented face and too much meat around the top of his lavender trunks. Ike Bush, alias Al Kennedy, came through the ropes in the opposite corner. His body looked better, slim, nicely rigid. Snaky, but his face was pale, worried. They were introduced, went to the center of things, and the usual instructions returned to their corners, shed bathrobes, stretched on the ropes. The gong rang, the scrap was on. Cooper, a clumsy bum. He had a pair of wide swings that might have hurt when they landed, but anybody with 2 feet could have kept away from them. Bush had class, nimble legs, a smooth, fast hand, and a night that got away quick. That is, I should say, a right that got away quick on that night. It would have been murder to put Cooper in the ring with that slim boy if he had been trying, but he wasn't. That is, he wasn't trying to win. He was trying not to, and had his hands full doing it. Cooper waddled flat-footed around the ring, throwing his wide swings at everything, from the lights to the corner posts. His system was simply to turn them loose and let them take their chances. Bush moved in and out, putting a glove on the ruddy boy whenever he wanted to, but not putting anything in the glove. The customers were booing before the first round was over. The second round was just as sour. I didn't feel so good. Bush didn't seem to have much influence on our little conversation. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Dinah Brand trying to catch my attention. She looked hot. I took care not to have my attention caught. The room act, or I should say, the roommate act, in the ring continued in the third round to the tune of yelled, "Throw 'em out! Why don't you kiss him?" and "Make some fights" from the seats. The pugs waltz them around corner to corner, nearest to me and booing broke off for a moment. I made a megaphone of my hands and bawled, "Back to Philly, Al!" Bush's back to me. He wrestled Cooper round, shoving him to the ropes, so Bush, faced my way. From somewhere far back in another part of the house, another yelling voice came. "Back to Philly, Al!" Max Swain, I supposed. A drunk off to one side lifted his puffy face and bawled the same thing, laughing as if it were a swell joke. Others took up the cry for no reason at all, except it seemed to disturb Bush. His eyes jerked from side to side, and under the black bar of his eyebrows, one of Cooper's wild mitts clouded, and the slim boy on the side of the jaw was stunned for a moment. Ike Bush piled down at the referee's feet. The referee counted 5 in 2 seconds, but the gong cut him off. I looked over at Dinah Brown and laughed. There wasn't anything else to do. She looked at me and didn't laugh. Her face was sick as Dan Rolfe's, but angrier. Bush's handlers dragged him into his corner and rubbed him up. Not working very hard at it, he opened his eyes and watched his feet. The gong was tapped. Kid Cooper paddled out, hitching up his trunks. Bush waited until the bum was in the center of the ring and then came to him fast. Bush's left glove went down, out practically out of sight, and in Cooper's belly. Cooper said, "Ugh!" and backed away, folding up. Bush straightened up with him with a right hand, poked him in the mouth, sank him with a left again. Cooper said, "Ugh!" again, and had trouble with his knees. Bush cuffed him once on each side of the head, cocked his right, carefully pushed Cooper's face into position with a long left, and threw his right hand straight from under his jaw into Cooper's. Everybody in the house felt the punch. Cooper hit the floor, bounced, and settled there. It took the referee half a minute to count 10 seconds. It would have been just the same if he had taken half an hour. Kid Cooper was out. The referee had finally stalled through the count. He raised Bush's hands. Neither of them looked happy. A high twinkle of light caught my eye. A short, silvery streak slanted down from one of the balconies. A woman screamed. The silvery streak ended its flashing slant in the ring with a sound that was partly a thud, partly a snap. Ike Bush took his arm out of the referee's hand and pitched down on Kid Cooper. A black knife and a handle to go with it stuck out of the nape of Bush's neck. Chapter 10. Crime Wanted, Male or Female. Half an hour later, when I left the building, Dinah Brand was sitting at the wheel of the pale blue Marmon, talking to Max Thaler, who stood in the road. The girl's square chin was tilted up. Her big red mouth was brutal around the words it shaped, and the lines crossing its ends were deep and hard. The gambler looked unpleasant as she did. His pretty face was yellow and tough as oak. When he talked, his lips were paper thin. It seemed to be a nice family party. I wouldn't have joined it if the girl hadn't seen me and called. "My God, I thought you were never coming." I went over to the car. Thaler looked across the hood at me with no friendliness at all. "Last night I advised you to go back to Frisco." His whisper was harsher than anybody's shout could have been. "Now I am telling you." "Thanks all the same," I said, and I got beside the girl. While she was stirring up the engine, he said to her, "This isn't the first time you've sold me out. It's the last." She put the car in motion, turned her head back over her shoulder, and sang to him, "To hell with you, my love. To hell with you." We rode to town rapidly. "Is Bush dead?" she asked, as she twisted the car into Broadway. Decidedly. When they turned him over, the point of the knife was sticking out the front. He ought to have known better than to double-cross them. Let's get something to eat. It's almost 11, and there's a full night's doings ahead. So if the boyfriend doesn't like it, it's just too bad. How'd you come out?" "Didn't bet." "So, Your Max doesn't like it? Didn't bet, she cried. What kind of an ass are you? Who ever heard of anybody not betting when they had a thing like that sewed up? I wasn't sure it was sewed up. So Max didn't like the way things turned out? You guessed it. He dropped plenty. And then he gets sore with me because I had the sense to switch it over and to get the win on. She stopped the car violently in front of the Chinese restaurant. The hell with him, the little tin horn runt. Her eyes were shiny because they were wet. She jabbed a handkerchief into them as we got out of the car. My God, I'm hungry, she said, dragging me across the sidewalk. Will you buy me a ton of chow mein? She didn't eat a ton of it, but she did pretty well, putting away a piled-up dish of her own and a half of mine. Then, when we got back into the Marmon and rode out to her house, Dan Rolfe was in the dining room. A water glass and a brown bottle with no label stood on the table in front of him. He sat up in his chair, staring at the bottle. The room smelled of laudanum. Dinah Brand slid off her fur coat, letting it fall half off on a chair and half on the floor, and snapped her fingers at the lunger, saying impatiently, Did you collect? Without looking up from the bottle, he took a pad of paper and money from the inside pocket of his jacket and dropped it on the table. The girl grabbed it, counted the bills twice, smacked her lips, and stuffed the money in her bag. She went out to the kitchen and began chopping ice. I sat down and lit a cigarette. Rolfe stared at his bottle. He and I had never said much or had much to say to one another. Presently, the girl brought in some gin, lemon juice, seltzer, and ice. We drank, and she told Ralph. Max is sore as hell. He heard you'd been running around putting last-minute money on Bush, and the little monkey thinks I double-crossed him. What did I have to do with it? All I did was the same thing any sensible person would have done. Get in on a win. I didn't have any more to do with it than a baby did, she asked me. No, of course not. What's the matter with Max? Is he afraid the others will think that he was in on it too? That Dan was putting his dough down as well as mine? Well, that's hard luck. He can go climb a tree for all I care, the lousy little runt. Another drink would do. She poured another for herself and for me. Rolfe hadn't touched the first one. He said, still staring at the brown bottle. You can hardly expect him to be hilarious about it. The girl scowled and said disagreeably, I can expect anything I want, and he's got no right to talk to me that way. He doesn't own me. Maybe he thinks he does, but I'll show him different. She emptied her glass, banged it on the table, and twisted it around her chair to face me. Is this the level about you having $10,000 of Iliu's money to use to clean up the city? Yeah. Her bloodshot eyes glistened hungrily. And if I help you, will I get some of the 10? You can't do that, Dinah. Rolfe's voice was thick, but gently firm, as if we're talking to a child. That would be utterly filthy. The girl turned her face slowly toward him. Her mouth, on it, looked worn while talking to Thaler. I'm going to do it, she said. That makes me utterly filthy, does it? He didn't say anything, didn't look up from the bottle. Her face got red, hard, cruel. Her voice was soft and cooing. It's just too bad that a gentleman of your purity, even he is a bit consumptive, has to associate with a filthy bum like me. That can be remedied, he said slowly, getting up. He was laudanumed to the scalp. Dinah Brand jumped out of her chair and ran around to the table to him. He looked at her with blank, dopey eyes. She put her face close to his and demanded, So, I am too utterly filthy for you now, am I? He said evenly, I said to betray your friends to this chap would be utterly filthy, and it would. She caught one of his thin wrists, twisted it until he was on his knees. Her other hand, open, beat his hollow cheek half face, half a dozen times on each side, rocking his head from side to side. He could have put his free arm up to protect his face, but he didn't. She let it go to his wrist. She let go of his wrist, turned her back on him, and reached for the gin and seltzer. She was smiling. I didn't like that smile. He got up blinking. His wrist was red. She had held it and bruised his face. He steadied himself upright and looked at me with dull eyes. With no change in the blankness of his face and eyes, he put a hand under his coat, brought out a black automatic pistol, and fired at me. But he was too shaky for either speed or accuracy. I had time to toss my glass at him. The glass hit his shoulder. His bullet went somewhere overhead. I jumped before he got the next one out. Jumped at him and was close enough to knock the gun down. The second slug went into the floor. I socked his jaw. He fell away from me, and lay where he fell. I turned around. Dinah Brand was getting ready to bat me over the head with a seltzer bottle, a heavy glass siphon that would have made pulp of my skull. "Don't," I yelped. "You didn't have to bust him like that," she snarled. "Well, it's done. You better get him straightened out." She put down the siphon and I helped her carry him up to his bedroom. When he began moving his eyes, I left her to finish the work and went down to the dining room again. She joined me there in 15 minutes. "He's all right," she said, "but you could have handled him without that." "Yeah, but I did that for him. You know why he took the shot at me? So I'd have nobody to tell Max about any of this?" "No, because I'd seen you maul him around." That doesn't make sense to me," she said. "I was the one who did it. He's in love with you, and this isn't the first time you've done it. He acted like he had learned there was no use matching muscle with you. But you can't expect him to enjoy having another man see you slap his face." "I used to think I knew men," she complained, "but by God, I don't. They're lunatics, all of them." So I poked him and give him back some self-respect. Treat him as I would a man instead of a down-and-outer who could be slapped around by girls. "Anything you say," she sighed. "I give up. You ought to have a drink." We had a drink, and I said, "You were saying you'd work with me if there was a cut of some of Wilson's money, some of Wilson's 10 grand, if there was some of that for you." "There is." "How much?" "Whatever you earn, whatever you do is worth." "That's uncertain." "So's your help, so far as I know." "Is it? I can give you the stuff, brother. Loads of it. And don't think I can't. I'm a girl who knows her Poisonville." She looked down at her gray, stockinged legs, waved one leg at me, and exclaimed indignantly, "Look at that. Another run. Did you ever see anything to beat it? Honest to God, I'm going to go barefoot." "Your legs are too big," I told her. "They put too much strain on that material." "That'll do out of you. What's your idea of how to go on about purifying a village anyway?" "If I haven't been lied to, Thaler, Pete, the Finn, Lou Yard, and Noonan are the men who've made Poisonville the sweet-smelling mess it is. Old Iliu comes in for his share of the blame too, but it's not all his fault. Maybe. Besides, he's my client, even if he doesn't want to be, so I'd like to go easy on him. The closest I've got to any idea is to dig up any and all of that dirty work I can and might implicate the others, and run it out. Maybe I'll advertise, crime wanted, male or female. If they're as crooked as I think they are, I shouldn't have a lot of trouble finding a job or two that can bring them out, if you know what I mean. I shouldn't have any trouble, should I? Is that what you were up to when you uncooked the fight?" "That was only an experiment. just to see what would happen. So that's the way the scientific detective works. My God, for a fat, middle-aged, hard-boiled, pig-headed guy, you've got the vaguest way of doing things I've ever heard. Plans are all right sometimes, I said, and sometimes just stirring things up is all right, if you're tough enough to survive. And keep your eyes open, so you'll see what you want when it comes to the top. That's how you survive. That ought to be good for another drink, she said. Chapter 11. The Swell Spoon. We had another drink. She put her glass down, licked her lips, and said, "If stirring things up is your system, I've got a swell spoon for you. Did you ever hear of Noonan's brother Tim, the one who committed suicide at the Mock Lake a couple of years ago?" "No." "You wouldn't have heard much. Anyway, he didn't commit suicide. Max killed him." "Yeah?" "For God's sakes, wake up. I'm giving you the real stuff here. This is real. Noonan was like a father to Tim. Take the proof to him, and he'll be after Max like nobody's business. That's what he'll want. That's what you'll want, isn't it?" "We've got proof. 2 people got to Tim before he died, and when he told them that what Max had done, well, they're both still in town, though one won't live a lot longer." "How's that?" She looked as if she were telling the truth, though with women, especially blue-eyed women, that doesn't always mean anything. "Let's listen to the rest of it," I said. "I like details and things. You'll get them. You ever been out to Mock Lake? Well, it's our summer resort, 30 miles on the Canyon Road. It's a dump, but it's cooler in the summer, so it gets a good play. This was summer a year ago, the last weekend in August. I was out there with a fellow named Holly. He's back in England now, but you don't care anything about that, because he's got nothing to do with it. He was a funny sort of an old woman. He used to wear white silk stockings turned inside out, so loose threads wouldn't hurt his feet. I got a letter from him last week. It's around here somewhere, but that doesn't make any difference. We were up there, and Max, he was up there with a girl he used to play around with, Myrtle Jensen. She's in the hospital now. She's in the city hospital, dying of Bright's disease or something. She was a classy-looking kid then, a slender blonde. I always liked her, except a few drinks made her too noisy. Tim Noonan was crazy about her, but she couldn't see anybody but Max that summer. Tim wouldn't let her alone. He was a big, good-looking Irish man, but a sap, a cheap crook, who only got by because his brother was chief of police. Wherever Myrtle went, he'd pop up sooner or later. She didn't like saying anything to Max about it, not wanting Max to do anything to put him in the wrong with his brother Tim, the chief. That is, Tim's brother, the chief. So, of course, Tim showed up at Mock Lake this Saturday. Myrtle and Max were just by themselves. Holly and I were with a bunch, but I saw Myrtle to talk to, so she and me, we got a note from Tim asking her to meet him for a few minutes that night in one of the little arbor things on the hotel grounds. He said if she didn't, he would kill himself. That was a laugh for us, a big false alarm. I tried to talk Myrtle out of going, but she had just had enough booze in her to feel gay, and she said she was going to give him an earful. We were all dancing in the hotel that night. Max was there for a while, and then I didn't see him anymore. Myrtle was dancing with a fellow named Rutgers, a lawyer here in town. After a while, she left him and went out on one of the side doors. She winked at me when she passed, so I knew she was going down to see Tim. She had just got out when I heard him say, "Nobody else pays any attention to it." I suppose I wouldn't have noticed it either if I hadn't known about Myrtle and Tim. I told Holly I wanted to see Myrtle and went out after her by myself. I must have been about 5 minutes behind her in getting out. When I got outside, I saw lights down by one of the summer houses and people. I went down there, and talking is thirsty work. I poured out a couple of hookers of gin. She went into the kitchen for another siphon and more ice. We mixed them up and drank them. She settled down and began her tale again. There was Tim Noonan dead, with a hole in his temple, and his gun lying beside him. Perhaps a dozen people were standing around, hotel people, visitors of one of Noonan's men, a dick named McSwain. As soon as Myrtle saw me, she took me away from the crowd, back in the shade of some trees. Max killed him, she said. What'll I do? I asked her about it. She told me she had seen the flash of the gun at first and thought Tim had killed himself after all. She was too far away, and it was too dark for her to see anything else. When she ran down to him, he was rolling around, moaning. He didn't have to kill me over her. I'd have... She couldn't make out the rest of it. He was rolling around, bleeding from a hole in his temple. Myrtle was afraid Max had done it, but she had to be sure, so she knelt down and tried to pick up Tim's head, asking, Who did it, Tim? He was almost gone, but before he passed out, he got enough strength to tell her. Max. She kept asking me, What'll I do? I asked her if anybody else had heard Tim, and she said the dick had. He had come running up while she was trying to lift Tim's head. She didn't think anybody else had been near enough to hear, but the dick had. I didn't want Max to get in a jam over killing a mutt like Tim Noonan. Max didn't mean anything to me, except that I liked him, and I didn't like any of the Noonans. I knew the Dick McSwain guy. I used to know his wife. He had been a pretty good guy, straight as an ace deuce tray 4-5, till he got on the force. Then he went the way of the rest of them. His wife stood as much of it as she could, and then she left him. Knowing this Dick, I told Myrtle, I thought we could fix things. A little Jack would ruin McSwain's memory, or if the Jack didn't, Max could have him knocked off. She had Tim's note threatening suicide. If the Dick would play along, the hole in Tim's head from his own gun and the note would smooth things over pretty. I left Myrtle under the trees and went out to hunt for Max. He wasn't around. There weren't many people there, and I could hear the hotel orchestra still playing dance music. I couldn't find Max, so I went back to Myrtle. She was all worked up over another idea. She didn't want Max to know that she had found out that he had killed Tim. She was afraid of him. See what I mean? She was afraid of what she and Max had and broke off. If he'd put her out that way, he knew she had enough on him to swing him. I know how she felt. I got the same notion later and kept thinking as quiet as she did. So we figured if it could be fixed up without knowing about it, so much the better. I didn't want to show in either. Myrtle went back home to the group around Tim and got hold of McSwain. She took him off a little way and made a deal with him. She had some dough on her. She gave him $200 and a diamond ring that had cost a fellow named Boyle $1,000. I thought he'd be back for more later, but he didn't. He shot square with her. With the help of the letter, he'd put over the suicide story. Noonan knew there was something fishy about the layout, but he couldn't never peg it. I think he suspected Max of having something to do with it, but Max had an airtight alibi. Trust him for that. And I think Noonan finally counted him out, but Noonan never believed it happened the way it was made to look. He broke McSwain, kicked him off the force. Max and Myrtle slid apart a little while after that. No row or anything. They just slid apart. I don't think she ever felt easy around him again. Though, as far as I know, he never suspected her of knowing anything. She's sick now, as I told you, and hasn't got long to live. I think she's not so much mind telling the truth as if she were asked. McSwain's still hanging around town. He'd talk if there was something in it for him, those two have got the stuff on Max, and wouldn't Noonan just eat it up? Is that good enough to give you a stirring up of a start? Couldn't it have been a suicide, I asked, with Noonan getting the last-minute bright idea to stick it to Max? That's a 4-flusher shoot himself, not a chance. Could bring Myrtle have shot him, maybe? Could Myrtle, you think, maybe have shot him? Noonan didn't overlook me that one. But she couldn't have been the third of the distance down the slope when the shot was fired. Tim had powder marks on his hand and hadn't been shot and rolled down the slope. Myrtle's out. But Max, he had an alibi. Yes, indeed, he always has. He was in the hotel bar, on the other side of the building all the time. 4 men said so. As I remember it, they said it openly and often, long before anybody asked them. There were other men in the bar who didn't remember whether Max had been there or not, but those 4 remembered. They'd remember anything Max wanted them to remember. Her eyes got large and then narrowed to black-fringed slits. She leaned towards me, upsetting her glass with an elbow. Peake Murray was one of the 4. He and Max are on the outs now. Peake might tell it straight now. He's got a pool room on Broadway. This Max Swain, does he happen to be named Bob? I asked. A bow-legged man with a long jaw like a hog's? Yes. You know him? By sight. What does he do now? A small-time grifter. What do you think he's up to? Not bad. Maybe I can use it. Then let's talk scratch. I grinned at the greed in her eyes. Not just yet, sister. We'll have to see how it works out before we start scattering pennies around. She called me a damn nickel nurser and reached for the gin. No more for me, thanks, I told her, looking at my watch. It's getting along towards 5 a.m., and I've got a busy day. She decided she was hungry again and reminded me that I was. It took a half an hour or more to get waffles, ham and coffee on a stove. It took some more time to get them into our stomachs and to smoke some cigarettes over extra cups of coffee. It was quite a bit after 6 when I got ready to leave. I went back to my hotel, got into a tub of cold water, braced me a lot, and I needed bracing. At 40, I could get along on gin as a substitute for sleep, but not comfortably. When I had dressed, I sat down and composed a document. I wrote, just before he died, Tim Noonan told me he had been shot by Max Thaler. Detective Bob McSwain heard him tell me. I gave Detective McSwain $200 and a diamond ring worth $1,000 to keep quiet and make it look like a suicide. With this document in my pocket, I went downstairs, had another breakfast, and was mostly coffee, and went up to the city hospital. Visiting hours were in the afternoon, but my flourishing my Continental Detective Agency credentials and giving everybody to understand that its hours' delay might cause thousands of deaths, or words to that effect, I got to see Myrtle Jensen. She was in a ward on the 3rd floor alone. The other 4 beds were empty. She could have been a girl of 25 or a woman of 55. Her face was bloated, spotty, masked. Lifeless, yellow hair in stringy braids, they lay on the pillow beside her. I waited until the nurse who had brought me up left. Then I held my document out to the invalid and said, "Will you sign this, please, Miss Jensen?" She looked at me with ugly eyes that were shaded with no particular dark color by the pads of flesh around them, then at the document, and finally brought a shapeless fat hand from under the covers to take it. She pretended to look her nearly 5 minutes to read 42 words I had written. She let the document fall down on the covers and asked, "Where'd you get that?" Her voice was tinny, irritable. "Dinah Brand sent it to me." She asked eagerly, "Has he broken off with Max? Has she broken off with Max?" "Not that I know of," I lied. I imagine she wants to have this hand in this case because it should come in handy. And get her to get her fool throat slit. Give me a pencil. I gave her my fountain pen and held my notebook under the document to stiffen it while she scribbled her signature at the bottom, and to have it in my hands as soon as she had finished. While I fanned the paper dry, she said, "If that's what she wants, it's all right with me. I don't care what anybody does now. I'm done. Hell with them all." She sniggered and suddenly threw the bedclothes down to her knees, showing me a horrible swollen body in a coarse white nightgown. "How do you like me? See me? I'm done." I pulled the covers up over her again and said, "Thanks for this, Miss Jennison. That's all right. It's nothing to me anymore. Only," her puffy chin quivered, "it's hell to die ugly like this." And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 11. Some gritty stuff in there, to be sure. A lot of gangstery kind of lingo as well. I hope you enjoyed it. We will continue with chapter 12 tomorrow night. Thanks for joining me. This has been Indiana Holmes for Storytime. Good night, everybody. Love to all.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.